Hey everyone, Nathan Nerdarchy here, with Nerdarchy. Hey everyone, Nathan Nerdarchy here, from Nerdarchy, for Nerds by Nerds, and we're going to be discussing the pros and cons of the horror game, or the horror genre. And with me I have...
I'm Ted.
Dave.
So, I've done some live-action horror, and I've also done some Ravenloft, and some other psychological horror-based stuff, and World of Darkness, but... not so much the games, but what do we kind of feel about the horror genre and the pros and cons?
Yeah, so the horror genre, first of all, you can just slap that pretty much on any kind of game.
Right.
You know, it doesn't matter where, you know, it doesn't matter what system you're playing. It doesn't matter the actual genre, because horror can actually be intermingled easily with anything.
Yeah.
You can turn, your space game into horror.
Sci-fi horror.
Look at Firefly. Oh, we got a Reavers encounter. That's horrific. So that's gonna be.
Well, yeah, that's a type of horror, but I hate that type of horror, personally. Yeah,
well, but I mean, it is horror. So
yeah, I would prefer Space Vampire or something, Ghost or something. But I like so there, horror breaks down in some different genres in itself, and
yeah,
I veer away from the splatterhouse type stuff.
I do
not
as well.
Because it bothers me, just because I'm not interested in it. It doesn't really appeal to me. But I love, the gothic Cthulhian type horror stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The Ravenloft stuff. I like subtle horror, and I find it is far more.
All right, so let's look at what the out of what you would classify as the types. So you've got Splatterhouse, which is going to be the crazy monsters that are out for blood and death. You've got psychological horror, where you've got different things going on,
extreme suspense,
So you might not ever encounter what it is that's causing. You just might be trying to survive or get out. So what else are you guys seeing?
I feel like everything else falls between those two spectrums.
Okay,
they're like the opposite, the polar opposites.
You either have elegant horror or you have body parts horror.
Yeah,
as far as I'm
blood
concerned.
flying everywhere. Yeah,
chopping little bits horror. So
right, and it could be. It doesn't have to be monsters either. It could be serial killers. It could be, it could be different kinds of violence. It could be like the Saw movies.
Right.
So the pros and cons. I think the hardest thing about horror is the mood, is capturing that mood and getting your players to buy into it, and actually for it to work, they actually have to get a little scared.
Right.
Yeah.
Or what it'll turn into is a Monster Hunter game, and in that case, we could really just play regular D&D.
Right.
So
a couple peasants go missing.
Yeah. So, it is the key to horror is setting the mood and capturing that mood and getting your players to experience it. Get them to be a little scared. Another con pro for horror is the fact that there is a lot to draw from. There's a lot of media out there.
Oh yeah.
It's very, there's everything from, Freddy Krueger and the Jason movies in Hellraiser to Lovecraft and things that are far more, Hitchcock even, things that are far more subtle, and they are more psychological. What do you guys got? What do you think?
Look, I don't have a whole lot of experience playing the horror games. It doesn't have a significant appeal to me. I'm not a suspense. I'm not a fright kind of guy. I don't even particularly care for that style of movies. But I mean, you could certainly have a game where since technically when you play D&D, every combat you go in, your life is on the line. All you have to do is just kind of ramp up that energy, that feeling, and it's something that I would see as a pro. If you've got players that are into it and you do it well, it's I think gonna be more impactful on the players. That they're gonna be talking about that kind of story more often than like, we killed some bugbears and some orcs last night.
Speaking out for doing it well, I don't feel. I'd say a con for horror is that you can't, unless you're doing Splatterhouse. Psychological horror, you can't do the slap together game without really good DMing skills at descriptions. So if you can set the mood, whenever you feel like it, like, oh, I just whipped up the description out of my head. Like when Dave did the Death Knight description.
Mm-hmm.
He just whipped that out, but it was fantastic.
Right.
And if I had saw that, I was creeped out. And if I was a player having to deal with that guy, I would totally creeped out. So that was a good, like, instantaneous description that would be good for psychological horror.
Mm-hmm.
While, so if you have a multi-step plan, or, a whole house that's kind of, you can, like, map out in a way, like a dungeon, that you can get all these different little things that add up to create that level of suspense that you want, then that's great. But I'd find that it would be hard to set the mood without some pre-writing for me, just personally. So I would see that as a con for most DMs that aren't as skilled as some people.
Yeah, I would agree that there's got to be a lot more prep work for the DM with that style of
so
game.
The level of skill is a con for me or prep work for doing psychological horror.
Well, for doing a good horror theme, it's really part mystery.
Yes,
You
that's
know,
where part of the prep I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's the hard part, is coming up with the mystery that you have to put out there, and the problems that have to be solved. And then on top of that, you have to kind of make it scary as well. Going back to what you were saying about horror, like, I find the replayability of horror isn't very high, because if you do it all the time, it's going to be harder and harder, I think, to invoke those feelings and those emotions.
Right.
Now, if you do it once or twice a year to your players and you just totally change the pace, I think that's going to be far more impactful than you trying to do it every weekend with them. After a while, they just kind of become numb to it.
Yeah.
You're like, oh no, another terrible thing I've got to face.
So, well, I think that some of the best stuff, in my opinion, is the stuff that when they don't see what happens, where you kind of like, it's off camera, it's off scene, and you can even do it in a sense that it's that way for the players' characters as well.
The suggested
action. Because their mind is going to create things that are far worse than whatever you're going to describe.
Absolutely.
And it'll be different for each of them. It'll be, they'll personalize it.
Right.
So like that is actually probably like the best way to go.
Yeah,
whenever
I
you
agree.
can. Instead of them finding the remains of someone, that someone gets dragged off out of their sight and then they lose track of it. Maybe they just find a little bit of blood, and after hearing a blood curdling scream or something.
You're like, oh, what happened? Did he get eaten?
Turn into a zombie? The only thing is left is someone's shoe and a little bit of blood.
They always lose a shoe.
It's always about the shoe, man. Don't matter how tight you tie those laces, one of them's coming off.
All right, I said if I'm ever in a modern, horror game, I'm duct taping my shoes to my feet.
Oh, you need Flint's spray-on shoes.
Yeah, the spray-on shoes. Or otherwise, you'll just have like two little rubber streaks from where you're getting dragged away, rather than the shoe loss. Yeah. You get one or the other.
So, off the top of my head, the only horror games I can actually think of are like the 70 different versions of Cthulhu and Ravenloft.
Right.
Now, I'm sure there's a bunch more out there, because there's a ton of different role-playing games.
Well, I mean, it depends upon what version of horror you're looking at. If you're into any of the zombie stuff, there's a horde of them as well.
Yeah.
And I've got the book for All Flesh Must Be Eaten. And I even contemplated running that kind of a game once. It's gonna be kind of crazy, but it never really had the desire from the players. I was like, I'll just table that for a while.
Well, yeah. See, Zombie Apocalypse is another form of horror that I don't mind like watching a flick or reading a book. As an ongoing game, it just seems kind of like boring and depressing. Like any game where it's like, okay, we didn't die. Okay, that's a win for this week. After a while, we'll get kind of old.
I agree. I mean, that's why I was kind of planning to do it as a one shot. I think that kind of thing fits more to that kind of
that's a
script.
good one shot type thing.
If you're looking to do a long standing game, as you said, it's going to get kind of dry.
Well, here's the thing: you gotta have to be like do like Walking Dead, or X Heroes, which is a good series about. It's a zombie apocalypse, but it takes place with heroes. Well, it very quickly becomes not about the zombie apocalypse and more about the stories that are happening within the zombie apocalypse. Mm-hmm. And in order to have that kind of game, that's what you need to do. That's what you need to strive for. Otherwise, there's nothing for the players to latch on to other than we survive another week. Yay. There's not, there has to be other stories. It almost like becomes, the zombies actually turn into the background and the backdrop, and not the story. And I think that's the only way it can be done well.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Yeah, then be more of the setting that you're in rather than the actual character interaction.
Right.
Yeah.
And then like Cthulhu too, like a game like that, how do you do that well? Like, you play Cthulhu, right? So what does everyone want to do? They want to find Cthulhu because Cthulhu, it's right in the name of the freaking game, right?
But you don't really want to find Cthulhu.
Yeah, but it's not good if you find him because you can't win. You just get eaten or going insane. So to me, again, that's not that fun. So what's the game have to be about? Well, it has to really be like a mystery. You have to solve a mystery, and almost like find a non-violent way to resolve the conflict.
Right.
Because the violent way of resolving conflict is you get eaten, I think.
Yeah. They find your shoe and a bit of blood.
Yeah.
Or, the bloodshed actually is, the extra chaos that brings Cthulhu here. You're looking to stop the cultists or find out who murdered who or, who's enacting the ritual. I mean, there's plenty of different Cthulian recipes for why he would be here.
Yeah, so I guess, like, in that we've described, like, the pros and cons all kind of wrapped up because they're almost like the same thing. Like, the things that are the pros are also the cons at the same time.
Yeah. What's good about a horror game? You can get scared. What's bad about a horror game?
You can get scared.
Trying to get scared 50 times in a row. So it's got to be, like Dave said, it's got to be about other stuff or it's just going to get old.
Yeah, so for me personally with those games, I would rather do it every once in a while.
Yeah.
And that can be worked into a regular campaign. For whatever you're running.
Whatever you're running, and that would be fun. Like, we're talking about playing, Dresden Files. We're talking about playing, Star Wars, Numenera. So you could run whatever the standard is, but you don't tell your players and you decide you're going to run a horror. As long as you have to know your players and know that you're going to get buy-in from it and that they're going to enjoy it. Mm-hmm. But, so you go into the session and you have to, like, kind of, like, build it up slow. And start with, really subtle things, instead of just throwing it all at once because it won't have the same impact. If you're going to have violence happen, all of a sudden, instead of what they're used to is actually being a part of the violence and seeing it, you then pull it away from them and take it out of scene, where there's only the suggestion of violence, or the aftermath. And, in that way, I think you'll be able to build suspense over the course of the next couple hours,
right?
Until it finally unfolds. And, you figure out little things that you can do to really, to really start tweaking their emotions. If there's NPCs around, pick them off slowly, one by one.
Especially the NPCs they like.
Yes, especially the ones they like. Or have something happen. If it's a fantasy game, have something happen to their mount, one of their mounts. That's... it gets extricated. What's that word?
Eviscerated.
Why they're sleeping. Next to them practically, and they never hear a thing, and they just find.
You mean like having the head cut off of a horse?
Yes, pretty much.
I was intimidated by that.
But for a horror game, you have to like do that, and you have to keep escalating. And before that, there might have been some things that would have happened before that in a true horror game.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't running horror. I just was trying to, send a message.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. That's what horror games are really about. That's it's about messing with your players. Like you do something like as the game's going on. One of the players, you're like, you don't hear something, but all of a sudden you feel something caress your cheek, and you look and there's nothing there. And you might do something like reach over and touch your player, as long as you get players that are okay with that.
Yeah, or you say, "Oh, Dan said something to you. You didn't." So you go, "Oh, what did you say?" And like, I didn't say anything. So like having the players think that there's some kind of voice going on.
Maybe before your players get there, lower the thermostat a little bit in the house.
Make it a little chilly.
Make it a little chilly. But honestly, that stuff does affect people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you talk about it later in the game, right? About how it's a little chilly. The air has been crisper than normal. Even though you're on a climate controlled spaceship, or something like that. And then all of a sudden the players are thinking, yeah, it is chilly, but they don't know that you dropped the thermostat 10 degrees, but still. You can start thinking of things like that.
Yeah. So with you can get a really good atmosphere with prep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think you could do it on the fly too.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is just coming up with things and tugging at their psychological heartstrings. Just creeping them out. So that's all I got for horror.
So with that, if you have any suggestions that you want to share, go ahead and put them in the comments below. Click share, subscribe, even like.
You can find us on Facebook at the Nerdarchy fan page.
And you can also check us out on Twitter.
So until next time, stay nerdy.